Imagine spending nearly 5 months in one of America's most notorious jails. Because no one told you your bail was $2. Not your lawyer. Not the court. No one. This is the true story of Aitabdel Salem, a man lost in a system that forgot to press send and made him pay the price. November 2014. New York City. The streets are bustling with holiday shoppers and cold gusts of wind slice through the city like knives. Somewhere in Queens, a man named Aitabdel Salem steps into a retail store. What happens next changes the course of his life. According to police reports, Salem allegedly attempted to steal a winter coat. During the encounter, he was also accused of assaulting an NYPD officer. In the eyes of the system, this wasn't a petty theft anymore. It had escalated to a violent felony. He was arrested on the spot and booked into the system. Within hours, Salem found himself in front of a judge. The charges were serious, and as is common with alleged assaults against law enforcement, the bail was set high: $25,000. Not unusual in a system designed to keep violent offenders off the streets, but devastating for someone with no means to pay it. For Salem, this wasn't just a number. It was a wall between him and freedom. He didn't have $25,000. Most people don't. And so, he was shipped off to Rikers Island, New York City's most notorious jail. Rikers isn't a place for rehabilitation or resolution. It's a holding ground, a limbo, a cage that traps the poor while the rich walk free. Salem, presumed innocent until proven guilty, would now wait in a violent, overcrowded facility until his court dates played out. But here's the kicker. Salem didn't know that this would be more than a temporary setback. He thought the system would work, that his lawyer would sort things out, that due process would prevail. He didn't know that his life was about to spiral into a bureaucratic nightmare. At this stage, no one was sounding alarms. No headlines. No public outrage. Just another man booked, processed, and locked away. But what no one could see yet was how wildly this story would unravel, all starting with that $25,000 bail. It was the kind of arrest the system handles thousands of times a year. But for Aitabdel Salem, this wasn't routine. It was the start of a story so absurd, it would seem fictional if it weren't tragically real. In hindsight, the moment he was told his bail was $25,000 wasn't just about money. It was about access. About power. About how the justice system treats the uninformed and under-resourced. And most importantly, it was about how easy it is to get lost in a machine that rarely looks back. So Salem sat and waited, not knowing that the charges against him were already crumbling, not knowing that within weeks, his legal status would change, and not knowing that the system would utterly fail to inform him of it. He had no idea his $25,000 wall was about to drop to just $2, because no one ever told him. And that's where the nightmare really begins. As winter turned to spring, and snow gave way to the gritty thaw of a New York City March, the legal gears behind the scenes of Salem's case began to shift. Prosecutors quietly failed to secure an indictment on the most serious charge, assaulting an NYPD officer. The grand jury didn't buy it. There wasn't enough to move forward. With the assault charge dropped, the case should have dramatically changed for Salem. The judge formally dismissed it. What remained were 2 minor, unrelated charges: tampering and criminal mischief. These weren't felonies. They weren't violent. They weren't the kind of charges that keep a man locked away. And yet, Salem stayed in jail. Here's where the story turns from unfortunate to outrageous. With the felony gone, the court re-evaluated the bail. Instead of $25,000, the bail was adjusted to reflect the remaining low-level charges. $1 per charge. $2. That was all that stood between Salem and freedom. But no one told him. Not the judge. Not the court clerk. Not the prosecutor. Not even his own public defender. No call. No visit. No letter. Nothing. In the complex web of New York's criminal justice bureaucracy, a basic truth got lost. A man should be told when he can go free. In Salem's case, that truth was worth exactly $2. But silence would cost him 5 months of his life. It was an administrative oversight. A clerical failure. A communication breakdown. Whatever label you choose, the result was the same. A man sat behind bars, completely unaware that his freedom was within reach. To Salem, the $25,000 number still loomed. No one had said otherwise, so he had no reason to question it. The courts had quietly moved on. The charges had quietly faded. And the bail had quietly become a joke. A joke no one was laughing at. Instead, he continued living inside Rikers, eating cold meals, sharing space with accused murderers, and surviving the kind of place that breaks people down. Meanwhile, his freedom cost less than a cup of coffee. This wasn't just a legal failure. It was a human one. A system so fragmented that the most basic right, to know your status, was ignored. And because of that, Aitabdel Salem remained trapped. In a place he no longer needed to be. For reasons no longer valid. With a bail he could have paid out of pocket. If only someone had told him. Imagine sitting in jail, day after day, believing that you are still under a $25,000 bail. Imagine not knowing that the only thing standing between you and the outside world is 2 crumpled dollar bills. That was Aitabdel Salem's reality. Weeks passed, then months, and still, no one told him. The $2 bail wasn't a secret, it was right there in the court records. But for reasons no one has fully explained, the information never reached the one person who needed it most. Inside Rikers, Salem had no internet, no access to court databases, no ability to verify his legal status. He relied entirely on his lawyer, on court notifications, on the system to do what it was supposed to do, communicate. But the communication never came. Not from overworked public defenders. Not from inattentive clerks. Not from anyone. It was as if the legal system had hit mute. So Salem did what inmates do when they think there's no hope. He endured. He followed the jail's routine. Wake up. Line up. Eat. Wait. Sleep. Repeat. Every day dragged like a slow-moving punishment, even though he had already been freed by the law, just not by the logistics. His cellmates changed. Some came and went on charges far more serious than his. One man was released on a $10,000 bail. Another walked after his family posted bond for an assault case. And yet here was Salem, trapped by $2 he never even knew he owed. The absurdity of it defies belief. But it happened. And it kept happening. Because when no one tells you you're free, how can you leave? Each day at Rikers cost New York taxpayers hundreds of dollars. Each day cost Salem a little more of his dignity. He missed family events. He lost job prospects. He suffered physical and emotional tolls that no system has repaid. All over a bail amount that would barely cover a MetroCard. Eventually, the truth surfaced. A new attorney, digging into his file, noticed the anomaly. A bail so low it was laughable. Phone calls were made. Questions were asked. And slowly, the pieces of the story came together. Salem wasn't just a victim of over-policing. He was a victim of silence. And when silence costs you 5 months of your life, it becomes its own form of injustice. To understand what Salem endured, you have to understand Rikers Island. It's not just a jail. It's a fortress of despair. A warehouse of the poor and forgotten. And for 5 long months, it was Salem's reality. He was never convicted. Never sentenced. Just waiting. Trapped in a purgatory made worse by confusion and neglect. His days were filled with fear and frustration. Inmates yelled through the bars. Guards barked orders. Fights broke out in the halls. At night, the sounds of anguish echoed through the concrete like ghostly cries. Food was scarce, cold, and often inedible. Medical care was minimal. Mental health support, almost non-existent. Salem, like so many others, was left to survive on instincts and prayer. And through it all, he didn't belong there. Not legally, not morally, not by any stretch of justice. He read books when he could find them, wrote letters that never got responses, tried to stay out of trouble in a place built to breed conflict. One guard once asked him why he was still there. Salem didn't have an answer, because the truth sounded too absurd. "I think my bail is $25,000, he said. But it wasn't. It was $2. That truth turned his daily suffering into a Kafkaesque nightmare. He lived each moment thinking he was being punished for a crime that had already disappeared. Other inmates came and went. Some laughed when they found out his story. Others were outraged. But no one could do anything. Not from the inside. Salem's only crime by that point was trusting that the system would correct itself. It never did. When he was finally released, he stepped into the sunlight not as a free man, but as a shattered one. Free in body, but burdened in spirit. And the worst part? The system never apologized. Never admitted the error. Never acknowledged what it had cost him. 5 months. Lost. For $2. When Aitabdel Salem finally walked out of Rikers Island in April 2015, it felt like the end of a nightmare. The sun was real again. The cold concrete walls were behind him. For the first time in nearly 5 months, he could breathe without fear. No more guards. No more roll calls. No more dehumanizing routines. He was free. But freedom, as Salem would soon discover, was just an illusion. Weeks after his release, he was arrested again. This time for something that borders on the surreal, failing to appear in court for the very assault charge that had already been dismissed. Yes, you read that right. The charge that had been dropped months earlier, the one that led to his original $25,000 bail, the same charge the grand jury declined to indict on, was being used as the basis for a rearrest. So how does this happen? According to Salem's attorneys, a court notice had been mailed to him with a date to appear. But the notice never arrived. In fact, it had been returned to sender. There was no follow-up, no confirmation, no effort to ensure he had received the court summons. And because he didn't show up, how could he, when he never got the letter? A warrant was issued. Salem was picked up and sent back behind bars. This time, bail was set at $30,000. Higher than before. Harsher than before. Even more disconnected from the facts. It didn't matter that the charge was no longer valid. It didn't matter that the court system had failed to notify him. All that mattered was that the machine was moving, and Salem was caught in its gears, again. He had gone from falsely imprisoned, to mistakenly freed, to wrongfully reincarcerated. Each of these mistakes compounding like interest. Each new arrest and bail setting reinforcing the lie that this man was dangerous or dishonest. But the truth was simpler and sadder. He was just a man abandoned by a system built to forget people like him. This new arrest shattered any sense of security he had managed to regain. The trauma from his months at Rikers resurfaced instantly. The fear, the confusion, the helplessness. Lawyers scrambled to intervene. Civil rights advocates took interest. Finally, Salem's story began to reach the media. But the damage was already done. His name had been dragged through the mud. His liberty stolen not once, but twice. It took time, again, to resolve the mess. Time Salem didn't get back. Time filled with uncertainty and dread. And through it all, not once did the justice system take responsibility. Not once did an official say, "We failed you." No accountability. No restitution. Just silence. A man arrested for missing a court date about a case that no longer existed. It sounds like fiction. It sounds like satire, but it was Salem's life. And the scariest part? It could happen to anyone. Aitabdel Salem's story isn't just a bizarre legal mishap. It is a spotlight on everything wrong with the American criminal justice system. The lack of communication, the disregard for due process, and the cruel indifference to human lives caught in its machinery. 5 months lost to a clerical failure. A rearrest over a dismissed charge. Bail amounts that made no sense. Legal representation that failed to inform. A system that kept functioning, even when its function was broken. And all over a $2 bail. That amount has become symbolic. $2 for freedom. $2 that no one told him about. $2 that the system couldn't be bothered to communicate. It begs the question, how many others are out there, sitting in jail cells for no reason? How many have missed their chance at freedom because no one told them they had one? Salem's case is not isolated. Across the country, thousands of people sit in pre-trial detention, not because they're guilty, but because they're poor, uninformed, or forgotten. They're locked away due to clerical errors, lack of legal access, or systemic neglect. What happened to Salem could happen to anyone without privilege or resources. And that should terrify all of us. The deeper issue here is the assumption that the system always works, that justice always prevails. Salem's story shatters that illusion. When he was finally released for good, there were no reparations, no apology, no recognition of the mental toll, the emotional scars, the life opportunities lost. He walked out with his dignity bruised, his trust in the system destroyed, and his story untold until now. But telling the story is only part of the solution. We need reform. We need accountability. We need a justice system that sees people, not case numbers. One that communicates, that corrects itself, that values truth over procedure. Because when a man spends 5 months in jail over a $2 bail he didn't know about, the system isn't just broken. It's dangerous. And until that changes, stories like Salem's will keep happening in the shadows, to people who can't afford to be seen. Justice shouldn't depend on luck, money, or the right lawyer. It should be a right. Salem paid the price for our broken system. And the bill came to $2.